Lamar Johnson taking his first steps of freedom since 2004.
Charges have been dismissed in a case involving two wrongfully convicted people.
After 14 years behind bars, all charges against Aguirre are dropped.
The defendant's motion to vacate the judgment of conviction is granted.
It is estimated that 90 to 95% of cases are settled without a trial. Plea bargaining has increased as a way to save time and money by avoiding costly and lengthy trials, but it often allows police and government misconduct to go unchecked because defendants do not have access to evidence and witness interviews prior to trial. White defendants are 25% more likely than black defendants to have their most serious charges dropped or reduced during plea negotiations when initial charges were felonies. In misdemeanor cases, white defendants were 75% more likely to have all charges carrying possible imprisonment dropped, dismissed, or reduced to lesser charges. Black defendants are also more likely to have charges stacked in drug and weapons offenses. It is notable that these patterns occurred in more instances where the accused had no prior convictions rather than those where prior convictions occurred. This suggests that when there is no predetermination in likelihood of reoffending, race is used as a proxy for criminal history. Although probation saves the defendant from immediate incarceration, there are many risks associated with accepting probation. If they commit a probation violation, they can be sent to prison. A guilty plea would mean admitting to the crime, and any convictions can go on the defendant's public record, which can reduce their access to employment, housing, and government assistance. 25% of all exonerations are cases where defendants pled guilty. 48% of exonerations occurred in cases where no crime is actually committed. This usually includes false or misleading evidence in drug charges. There are many reasons why someone would confess to a crime they did not commit. One of the reasons would be the offer of probation instead of prison time. In February of 2008, a 19-year-old Cinque Abbott answered the door to two police officers asking for more information about a drug dealer known to frequent the area. The officers threatened to plant drugs if he did not cooperate. When Abbott maintained that he did not have the information, the police wrote in the report that they had witnessed Abbott with the drugs and had confiscated 32 bags of heroin from him. Abbott pled guilty despite his innocence, because he was offered probation rather than jail time in return for a guilty plea. In 2012, both officers were caught on tape robbing a man they believed to be a drug dealer, but who was actually an undercover FBI informant. In 2022, Abbott's conviction was vacated. Sometimes lighter sentences are given in return for testimony about a co-defendant. Throughout his nearly 3 decades in prison, Robert Johnson maintained his innocence in a 1996 murder. Johnson was only 16 years old at the time, and the only evidence linking him to the case was the testimony of his co-defendant, who was offered a reduction in sentence of over 20 years. In March of 1995, 4 teenagers ranging from 15 to 18 years old were accused of sexual assault and murder despite DNA evidence that should have exonerated them. Vincent Thames, after seeing 3 of his friends go to trial and receive 30 to 40 years in prison, signed a plea deal to receive 30 years rather than the maximum sentence. A study in San Francisco found that African Americans were 5.2 times more likely to be detained before trial than white defendants, and they were 4.7 times more likely to use a public defender. Public defenders are often overburdened with cases and rarely have adequate time to review cases. Prosecutors may be subject to biases, either conscious or subconscious, stemming from the long history of a presumption of dangerousness surrounding minorities. Plea bargaining is a system that coerces people into forfeiting their constitutional right to a fair trial. There are many ways that we can work to reduce or eliminate racial biases in plea bargaining. Advocates from the Equal Justice Initiative suggest that prosecutors should be required to state on the record the reasons for plea offers and share data that would expose any disparities. Others have suggested removing race information from police reports and conversations between prosecutors and defense attorneys. Plea bargaining is a product of deeply rooted racial discrimination in the American criminal justice system.